Hey, welcome everybody. David here, and I've been thinking about music and the role music plays in our lives. What I didn't realize is how music can be used to better our lives. So, I've invited my friend Bill Protzmann to join us. He's a man on a mission to raise awareness of the power of music as self-care. So that's what we'll yak about today. What's up, everybody? David Yakir here for Yak About Today, hoping you are better, healthier, and more informed than any generation that came before. So if the years 46 to 64 mean something to you, then this is the place you want to be. Now put your headphones on, go for a run, and listen to what we yak about today. Okay, we are back. I'm David Yakir, and you're listening to Yak About Today. And as promised, I've got Bill Protzmann here, and he is the one that specializes in music as self-care, and apparently so much more. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, David. I'm so glad to be here, and welcome to everybody who's listening.
Oh, and everybody will be thrilled that you're on because you have a very unique way of thinking and a specialty about music sort of as a cure. And I think you've gone into a lot of areas that would be of great interest to our listeners. And as you know, our listeners are basically the youngest of the set, 55 plus. We call them the wiser and more mature of us.
Yes.
And it's interesting because you always hear about music, playing, music can do so good. I know people respond to singing, people respond to certain kind of meditation music, that type of thing. So why don't you do this? Why don't you give us a background? Because I think you came out of technology or something, and you were a musician, but you came out of technology, and all of a sudden this started happening. So why don't you give us a sequence of events that led to the discussion we're going to have today?
Sure. So I'm on the tail end of the baby boomer generation. About 61 is when I was born. So I was a little bit young to really dig rock and roll when it came out. And I've rediscovered that music later in life. I kind of knew that it was there, but growing up as a classical piano player, I was kind of in a different world, right? So I found out about all the incredible protest music from the Vietnam War era and beyond. And I've even had a chance to play some of that, performing with a band of veterans in recovery, actually. Got to play some Beatles and Stones and just, all this incredible music. And you play it and you go, wow, Paul McCartney's still alive, right? He's still making this music. It's so amazing. So I have a deep, deep personal engagement with music that doesn't go away. You learn to play the piano at an early age that way, and it's part of you. You can't stop it. And over the course of a lifetime, I've discovered how healing that is for me. It's really literally saved my life. I can tell a story about suicide and things like that, but music has really become a fascinating form of self-care. And in the period roughly from the early 90s until now, there's been a lot of research in the music therapy field about how that works, like the science behind how music really affects us. And in a word, music is medicine. It affects us in predictable ways. So being able to use that for my own self-care has been something that I've sort of backed into. Oh my gosh, I was doing that with music and I didn't realize it, So the science is caught up in a certain sense with what we can do. But I'm a big advocate of taking care of yourself. And oh my gosh, is there a need for that these days? There's just not enough therapy to go around. So if you can engage with music in a self-care way, you can give yourself relief from distress and depression and anxiety at a level that you probably didn't realize was possible. And teaching that has been the course of my last maybe 20 years, mostly as a volunteer, but now moving into a real life business that stood up around the concept of music as self-care. I've been an IT guy to support my musical habit, for most of my career. And now making this shift is it's incredible to me. I mean, David, the things you can do that we never even thought about before, or maybe we might have known about, but putting the value back in music and using it, what an incredible tool.
You mentioned something actually at the beginning just now about suicide. And I'm really particularly interested in this because there's a significant rate of suicide in the, I call them the 46, 64 generation.
Yes.
Other people call them the baby boomers. And, you seem to have created, I don't know, therapy, a program. Maybe you can talk to that because I think that's interesting. There is a lot of depression in aging. There always has been, but possibly more for the baby boomers because the whole premise of our thinking and our lifestyle was always youth. And
True.
now age is hitting,
Yeah.
and for some, some of it's economical, that type, the economy and some things are just aging, but there is a significant rate of suicide. And if there's a program out there, maybe you can tell us a little about that.
Oh, of course. We all read the study about how folks in our age group, specifically men, are taking their own lives at an alarming rate, and it's increasing rather than decreasing. A lot of the promises that we hope to live into in our lives simply haven't materialized for whatever reasons. And I know I grew up with the, hey, if you follow the rules, you're going to be successful and happy. And that's not the case anymore, right? Those rules have changed. So a lot of our peers, yours and mine, I'm sure, have thought deeply about what it means to be at this point in our lives. And in many cases, to be there without the hopes and dreams realized that we'd hope to have realized by now. And that includes me. So when I wound up as an empty nester, and actually after another divorce, a second divorce, being very alone, I found myself at a place that was way more depressing than most of the chronic depression that I've lived with all my life. The magic is this. Things like depression and distress and anxiety are there for me to open doors to new potential, new possibility. And as a musician, having to go deeply into emotions all of my life to perform them authentically at the piano, I was quite familiar with the process of exploring sadness, exploring grief, exploring ecstasy. That's all in the music that I play. But I didn't realize that I could do that for myself. And that by allowing those feelings to come in deeply, in safety, like I'm going to sit in a chair with headphones on, right, and listen to music that triggers me at a deep level. By allowing myself to do that, I was able to embrace a paradox that I hadn't been able to embrace any other way. And the science on it is that doing that often bubbles up a third way that you didn't know before, where you're holding two things that are obviously true. In my case, my own suicidal ideation and my own desire to keep breathing, holding both of those things at the same time with this music that triggers me so deeply to go so far inside, I was able to arrive at a third thing that I didn't know before when I was just buried in depression or trying to avoid it and, be a good guy, do the stuff we're supposed to do. That's the process, allowing those things to come in deeply. And through music, you can do this in safety, to find what's at the depths. A poet that I love has written a poem about how you dive into this well that's dark, but at the bottom there's gold. And if you're willing to go that deep, you're going to find the gold. And that's a process that I've seen repeated over and over in my own life and with other people that I know. And great writers have written about it. I think Carl Jung comes to mind. He's written about that process. And the poet that I mentioned, David White. So this is a normal thing we humans do. The truth is that we've been told not to go there. And I don't know how you can listen to some of the great music in the world and not be affected by it emotionally, but that's the plan. Like, engage with that. Get deep into the emotion and see what's there for you, because often there's gold.
So, actually, I have a big question, but I think we're going to go to break. But I'll give you the question now so you can think about it. Because you've written a whole bunch of articles on the power of music, right? And you're an author who wrote The Importance of the Human Spirit.
Yeah.
right? So these are two ideas that have been around a long time, right? And but right now, you think they're really essential to society, right? I want you to
Yes.
tell us why, but first, I have to talk about our great sponsor. And then we're going to go to commercial break. And when we come back, we'll be back with Bill Protzmann. And I'm David Yakir, and you're listening to Yak About Today. So it's David. Now, as you guys know, New Vision Eye Center has been a long-time sponsor of Yak About Today, even way back when we were Yak About Tech. And I've told you dozens of times that I wouldn't trust my eyes to anyone else. Not because they are a sponsor, but because they are my doctors, and I couldn't, in all consciousness, have them as my sponsor unless I thought they were the best. So I'll say it once again. Go see Doctors Minotti, Reinauer, Tate, and O'Brien because, ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't trust my eyes to anyone else. All right, we are back. I'm David Yakir. I'm here with Bill Protzmann, and I want to continue this conversation. So before we broke, I was asking that, I feel like, especially a child of the 60s, in my case anyway, and early 70s, the concept of the power of music or the, human spirit, I feel, and I'll try to do this, and don't laugh at me at trying to articulate this, but it seems very Zen, how we used to use the word Zen.
Well said.
And so just the idea of it reminds me of all those years. And of course, it stopped once I went into the workforce and stressed out and marriage and all that stuff. But all of a sudden, the idea of what we were learning back in the 60s and early 70s about finding your center and listening to music and very spiritual and all that, it seems like that is sort of the essence, what I think you're getting to. And is it that you're bringing it back for today? Is there a different take on it? Or is it just that society is so different that we could use a good dose of it?
I love this question. One of the things that's typical of our society these days is we don't do anything to care for ourselves unless there's scientific evidence, right? And I'm down with that. That's cool. But we have thousands of years of evidence of how human beings respond to sound and rhythm. And pick any culture that you like. There's a musical component to that culture. In our own culture here in America and perhaps in the Western world, our trend has always been toward pop music. And I don't have anything wrong. Pop music is great. It's like sugar in your diet. But you can't eat an all-sugar diet and expect to be healthy. So consuming that incredible, the incredible beat that's in house music or even the incredible beat that's in rock and roll, we need that. That's an up-regulating thing. It charges us up. It gets us ready for whatever, as much as we need the down-regulating, the relaxing kind of things. And again, thousands of years of science, what we would call anecdotal evidence, not science in our modern terminology, but this anecdotal evidence around the power of music, and in fact, a lot of other things that are pretty ancient, Zen being a great one, is necessary. Human beings need music. We just can't live in silence. We need it. And in ways that do things like make us more intelligent. Yes, in fact, the Mozart effect has been disproven, but there is evidence to suggest that our brain activity increases around certain kinds of sounds. Same with, of course, relaxation, we all know. So although these are very, very ancient concepts, modern science is starting to prove them out for us in ways that, modern people understand as evidence. And those of us who've been playing music all of our lives are here to lend our support to modern science. Say, yeah, that is in fact how it works for me. When I hear that kind of music, that's what it does.
So just so I'm sure, so I understand better. Mm-hmm. So you've got a concept of music as self-care, and then there's therapy, right? So correct. There's a difference, or is one something you can do for yourself, and the other is, I don't know. I'm not even sure I can figure out the difference.
I understand the question, and therapy is a term that gets tossed around a lot. So, music therapy is actually a formal term that means that you, the client, are in a therapeutic relationship with a therapist who uses music as the modality for uncovering all of the things that need to be like dealt with in your therapeutic relationship. So it's a two-party system, right?
Yeah.
It works with an expert and a client. That's music therapy. And please, if you're going to go for this, find a board-certified music therapist. They're out there. It's a recognized profession in many states. It's reimbursable by insurance. And that's phenomenal. Music therapists do incredible work. Most of their work is related to things like clinical autism. They do a lot of work with Alzheimer's patients and the aged. There is scientific evidence that supports music therapy in those clinical environments. What I'm talking about is being aware of how music works on you. And when you have that awareness, David, you can use that to use music to help change your scene, whatever that might be. A lot of us struggle with depression. So using music to sort of bring you through that depression is one way of being able to care for yourself that doesn't require an external therapist working with you. Now, if you're in therapy, hey, that's great. Just like, if you have a religious belief, adding Zen or Buddhism on top of that, not a problem. So it's always great to have a therapeutic relationship if you're going to do that work. Trauma work, for example, I've done trauma therapy, so that needs a therapist. But caring for myself with music, every time I'm at the piano, I'm doing that. Now I understand how that works.
So it even works with people who aren't musicians by
sure.
putting it today, streaming something that is appropriate for them. Something.
Exactly.
Got it.
When you listen, you're choosing your medicine, right?
Got it. That's great. There's something that really did catch my attention, and I think specifically because of the markets that this radio show plays in, besides obviously the pod world. We have a very, very big veterans population in the markets, that we play in. And I've noticed that you do a lot of volunteer work with, do you call it Guitars for Vets? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
what it's called? Right? Talk to my veterans. I've taken ownership of them, as you can see, and tell them how this works and why it's important.
So Guitars for Vets, nationwide nonprofit, and the idea is you learn to play or reacquaint yourself with a guitar, and after a series of lessons, you're given a brand new guitar and all the trappings for your very own. There is a post-traumatic stress component to this, and there's research that supports playing the instrument helps with symptoms of post-traumatic stress. But if you want to check this out, every VA hospital has got a line into Guitars for Vets, and they've got a bunch of volunteers ready to teach you. So just find it, do it. It is an incredible program.
All right. Okay, so here's something, and I don't think I can do it before I have to break again. But let me give you the question, and I'll explain why I'm asking it. So this is very spiritual, everything that you're talking about.
Yes.
And I've had this discussion. I interviewed somebody recently who talks about our understanding of how to rest. We don't understand the concept of resting and how important. And the book was called Sacred Rest, and her name was Sandra Dalton Smith. And there was a spiritual aspect to what she talked about in how we rest. What I'm always curious about is where religion comes into this, and or is it religious at all, or is it just spiritual? But I don't have enough time to for you to answer right now, because but you will answer, and I'm going to give everybody a chance to listen to that answer. I want to tell the broadcast audience right now, we have to say goodbye. And I hope you all go on to yakabouttoday.com and listen to the rest of this interview with Bill Protzmann, because I think things are about to get very interesting. And before I forget, I want to remind you all that we set up this Facebook page, the Yak About Today Facebook page, and we do put our shows on Facebook, obviously. But if there's anything that you want to tell us, a good way to contact us is through the Facebook page, as well as writing to David at yakirgroup.com. Tell us your ideas about the type of things you'd like to listen to or the information you'd like to get. So we did set up the Facebook page specifically for that. I hope you'll use it. And of course, you can write to me, via david at yakirgroup.com. And please listen to yakabouttoday.com for the entire interviews that we play. All right? So again, it's David Yakir. And for the broadcast audience, we say goodbye. Until next week, love you. Peace out. Hey, it's David Yakir, and you're listening to Yak About Today. And I hope our broadcast audience made it on to this section, because we're going to continue talking to Bill Protzmann, and I just asked the question, and the broadcast audience heard it, but unfortunately they didn't hear the answer unless they're listening now. So I'm trying to understand what part, and I'm using two words, and I don't know if they intermix, spirituality or religion plays into the concept of music. And you say it, you say the word spirit, human spirit. So what do you mean? Is it religious? Is it not? Is it?
Yeah. This is a lovely area. The differences between religion and spirituality, we could talk for hours, but let's bring it into music. So when you're listening to music and the music makes your skin crawl in a way that, like, you get goosebumps or something, that music has reached your human spirit. And by that I mean that inside of you there's something that responds very deeply to triggers, whatever they might be, good, bad, otherwise. And if you can find that thing and engage it in whatever you have to do, like the work you do or the contemplative thought that you do, whatever your activity is, if you can engage that thing inside you, you're going to have a much more authentic result at the end of the day. For example, coming on the radio, we hope that we can be as our most authentic selves, that we have the opportunity to really communicate with each other and with the audience. That's a human spirit motivated desire. Now, there are shades of gray on this too, because Bernie Madoff made a bunch of money, and I'm sure that his human spirit was engaged in that operation. Unfortunately, it was illegal, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that the impetus, the desire to do it, was anything less than from the human spirit. To talk about this, you have to put right and wrong aside, because the human spirit goes in lots of different directions. Now, contrast that with religion. So religion is where the rules show up, and they tell you what parts of the human spirit are acceptable and what parts aren't, and how you can know the difference. And that's cool, because there are lots of different expressions of right and wrong and the human spirit in the world. And they sort of conform to whatever, like how many billions of us are there now. So by and large, they sort of filter into separate religious groups that care for you in a way that resonates the most with your own authenticity. So that's sort of my guiding line about human spirit. Now, let's take it back one step, because the human spirit is so important to the United States Army that they commissioned a study to find out how to make soldiers ready with their human spirit. Now, a soldier, of course, has a difficult job. Their job is to, break things and hurt people. And that may be morally wrong, but if you're a soldier, that's your job, and you must be ready to do that job. So the Army has training programs to train the human spirit, and not to brainwash the mind, but to bring the inner impetus behind action fully into engagement with the duties of a soldier. And as you can probably guess, that's difficult. But they have seen the readiness of the human spirit as part of physical, emotional, mental. So now we have spiritual readiness as part of the regimen for a soldier in the U.S. Army. That's what got my attention, because all the veterans that are out there right now, in many cases physically broken, are probably also in some ways spiritually broken. We hear about moral injury and things like that, where it's very difficult to reconcile what you had to do in war with what you have to do as a civilian. These kinds of things they may be moral questions, but they come from a deep desire to live from your human spirit in an authentic way. You just don't have that kind of controversy in your life as a soldier if you're out of touch with your human spirit. Is that getting us closer to where you want to go here?
I think so. You know, there was something you said earlier that sort of triggered a thought. It was something about the soldier is trained, you know, to hurt, shoot, kill.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how we think about those things. When you said that, I don't know why somehow it was at odds to the way maybe it's because of where we live in the society. I had always assumed the soldier was there to protect, right, and make peace and to keep the peace. I never, I never thought of it as sort of just throwing out that, yeah, soldier's trained to kill, and yes, obviously he is, and to do it well, by the way.
Yes.
But in my mind, I don't know why it just sort of set off a piece of my mind saying, wow, I thought they were trained to keep the peace, but I don't know why. I'm not even sure why I brought it up. But anyway, that is where I wanted to go. But for the sake of time, I've got a whole bunch of baby boomer questions.
Sure. Fire away.
So, it's like five of them. They're not terribly complicated. I guess the first one's the easiest one, right? About being a baby boomer. I think there's two parts to this. I think one you're probably ready for, the other one you'll have to think about, or maybe you'll know the answer to both. What is the best part of being a baby boomer and aging, and what's the most difficult part?
Oh gosh, the best part of aging, I think, is different than being the best part of the baby boomer. I don't like the compression that goes along with becoming older, because you feel like, will this be the last time that I do X, whatever X is, water ski, snow ski, climb a mountain. So that's difficult. But on the other side of that, the baby boomer generation did something pretty amazing for the world, in our era anyway, which is, I think, it gave us a more humane social consciousness. We'd come off of the World War II. Everything was going right. We did some nice things to help Japan and Germany get back on their feet. But at the same time that all that was happening, we had this incredible civil rights movement that's still going on today with LGBTQI people. And baby boomers were the generation that sort of kicked that off, if you will, or had the fight about it, had the conversation that resulted in things getting better, where we had those two, a giant paradox, where we had race relations, for example. Both sides of that argument were true, but we had to come up with something that was more in the middle that brought us forward to where we are now. And we haven't solved racism, but we've made some incremental progress. And that got started in our generation, David. And we can sort of take pride in the fact that we helped to move the ball forward, So that's one of the exciting things. Vietnam War, of course, sparked a lot of controversy and got us talking more about war and peace and what's appropriate in the world. And to your comment a minute ago, I forget the name of it right off the top of my head, but did you know that there are veterans who are young veterans out of the Israeli army, as well as young veterans out of the Palestinian army, who have started a group where both groups of veterans assemble for peace. So military service is mandatory, of course. After they've served, those who want to are promoting this idea of veterans for peace in the Middle East, and probably one of the most difficult places in the world. So I think our generation helped to get that potential started as well. And I think we would be really proud of that.
Then I actually have a question. It wasn't in my scribbling, so it's coming right from the head to the mouth right now. Cool. And that is, I've had a couple of conversations around the dinner table, and I don't think this discussion is controversial, but there was, if I think back, right, there was a lot of hope that there was really going to be a lot of change, and certainly there was. I mean, everything about society and business and industry and the world and the planet did change.
Yeah.
But it seems like it moved forward a little, and maybe it's this whole spiritual thing and everything I had, all the expectations I had of where the world was going to go. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, last 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years, I don't know how long, not only did we stagnate, I think, to these hopes and dreams that the baby boomers, I think, brought to the table, but there's been a slow step backwards, almost as if, and I also had this discussion last week, it's almost as if we want to go to that time before the baby boomers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Things were better then, right?
Well, supposedly, and I think that's just because people had this television, Leave It to Beaver, Dennis the Menace look at what they thought the world. That's the world they remember. They don't remember the reality of the world and, what was really going on in this world, and racism and prejudice. And, it wasn't all, I mean, yes, there was a big middle class growing and all that, but it was pretty dicey living in this world. So anyway, the basic question is, have we taken a step back, right? Or is it just we're just holding because that's what happens, after a while?
Yeah. Well, I guess I've thought about a lot about this too. I'm not a very active political person, and for what it's worth, my political ideology is libertarian. The two parties just don't do it for me. But I think maybe what happened was we got a great grassroots thing going, and then it got institutionalized. And as it rose up the levels into government, it got diluted and perhaps co-opted in many ways. But if you stay out of the political environment, what I've noticed is that worldwide there are grassroots things happening that are incredible. The kid from Pakistan who's come out in favor of gun control and has a worldwide following. I think did she get a Peace Prize?
I think she did. I think she got Nobel. Yeah.
Yeah. Malala, I believe is her name. Anyway, there's a great example. And then what's happening with micro industry and micro lending, these things that are sort of below the radar in our own country, the movement to legalize medical marijuana, now apparently it's going to be recreational, but to get that done at a federal level, that's been grassroots.
Right.
And we have a huge groundswell in the last 30 years of entrepreneurism, which, if you look at it, may have been triggered by companies like Amway and Mary Kay back in the 50s and early 60s, right?
Right.
So there's people are still looking at the workforce, but when I see people leaving the workforce, what I feel, and they haven't started to track stats on this, is that they're going into business for themselves, taking back control of their lives, and doing something that's useful and that's comes from the heart, and makes a real contribution instead of just sitting in a cubicle turning the crank. And I've sat in that cubicle too, man. So I'm part of it. But finding a way that doesn't necessarily focus on what the media wants us to believe often can be very inspiring. And as I watch the young kids, like coming out of the military, a lot of them do go into jobs, but a lot of them are, hey, I can do this. I'm on my own now. And if they have any kind of a disability paycheck, that gives them a little bit of a cushion to be able to start something new. And oftentimes those things they start could be nonprofits that help amputees, for example, play sports at a level that they wouldn't be able to play, or that help veterans find out what kind of job might work best for them. And some remarkable entrepreneurial thought in the young folks these days. It's really heartening to me to see that. So just a few examples. But like you, David, I read the news, or I like to read literary magazines, and there's a lot of lament right now in the world. It's tough. It's a tough place when you look at what they want you to know.
And it's even tougher because our ability to spread the word is instantaneous in every single direction, and there's a lot. So I have two final questions, and I'll shoot them both together because I think they're related.
Okay.
So we can close out, and these are personal about you.
Oh, sure.
So here they are. So one is, the concept of retirement. You're doing it. How do you feel about it? And second, is there important work that you feel for yourself you have to do with the next 40 remaining years, 50 remaining years that you have?
Good questions. I've never really thought of myself as retiring. When you're at the piano, it's the most amazing thing, at least for me. I don't feel age there. I just feel the opportunity to connect with audiences or with anyone with music. I could never retire from that. And, hopefully I'll be able to turn that thing that I've done all my life into something useful, which maybe answers your second question of getting the word out there and sort of reminding people that music, which is all around us and now virtually free. I mean, for $10 a month, you have access to billions of songs. It's incredible. But the fact that that is out there and that unlike all the Affordable Care Act medical options that we have, this is one that is so underutilized. And the richness of the medicine that's out there, the richness of the music that's out there is just waiting for all of us to become more intimate with and to discover how it works on us and perhaps to take some of the other medications out of our life in favor of something that the human system responds to naturally and was basically set up to use, the sound and music.
That's great. So the last thing I always ask, and it's always up to the guest, is, of course, everybody who comes on or anybody that does interviews on television and radio has something they want to promote. And you've spent really the last, last 50 minutes or 45 minutes talking so much about music. And so tell us how people outside can benefit from what you've learned about music, the message you're trying to get across. It's the ability to do self-promotion, I guess,
I could give you a bunch of websites or whatever, but just searching for Bill Protzmann will probably get you engaged. There are many, many ways right now that people are bringing these kinds of tools to the world. Guitars for Vets is one. I'm doing work in that. Music therapy is doing outreach in this. There are authors who are writing about very old philosophies like Stoicism in brand new ways. Ryan Holiday's written a couple of books that are based on the teachings of Epictetus, of all people, but they're actually really great because, the title, The Obstacle is the Way. Just think, if you're in a hard spot, that's the way forward. Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about with music. Finding the depth in your music is going to bring you forward. It's not going to bury you. It's safe and usable. So I appreciate the opportunity to promote something. I'll choose my book, which is called More Than Human. It's an incredible way to sort of get yourself reacquainted with these concepts that are ways of acting that actually are attractive, and in business they're profitable. Imagine that. Change the way you act, and it's a profitable thing. Gosh. So take a look for Protzmann and More Than Human. You'll find me out there. And of course, you can always find me through David's show. That's right. And sorry I asked the question in such an awkward way. Usually somebody's coming on with a brand new book and you say, hey, go buy the book. But you aren't coming on with a brand new book. There's a philosophy here, and forgive me for saying it, but I really believe this, that you can get further down the road by lifting other people up first. That's true. And I love that when that happens, because there is so much great stuff that's out there. And so if somebody talks about me, that's great. But I love to talk about all the great tools that are out there, like other than what I do. I'm just one way in, right? So let's all get on the boat. That's great, and I certainly will. I want to thank you so much. It's always a highlight of my day when I get to speak to somebody like you. So I want to thank you for that. And, as we move forward, maybe we'll have you back again, because I think there may be a lot more to talk about. And probably the next time you'll have even a newer book or something new to add to the audiences. You're very welcome, knowledge. David. Thank you. All right. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Take out the papers and the trash. Boy, you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak. Don't talk back. Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom.
Don't you give me no dirty looks. Your father simply knows the crooks. Tell all your hoodlum friends outside. You ain't got time to take a ride. Back in the act.
Don't talk back.